Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Not All Wounds Are Visible. My name is Paul, and I'll be in the background answering any WebEx technical questions. We have a few housekeeping items before we get started. If you experience any technical difficulties joining today's session, please dial 1-866-779-3239, or you can message me, the WebEx producer, by using the Q&A panel. During the presentation, all participants will remain in listen-only mode. And as a reminder, this event is being recorded for rebroadcast. We will be holding a Q&A session at the conclusion of the presentation, and we encourage you to submit written questions at any time by using that Q&A panel at the bottom right of your screen. Please type your questions into the text field and hit send, and keep the drop down as all panelists. With that, we invite you to sit back, relax, and enjoy today's presentation. And with that, I'll hand it over to Donna Jacobs. Donna, you have the floor.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you so very much. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us today for one in our series of community conversations, Not All Wounds Are Visible, where we focus on mental health and wellness. As Paul said, I'm Donna Jacobs. I'm a Senior Vice President at the University of Maryland Medical System, and I will moderate today's program. As you're likely aware, September is Suicide Prevention and Awareness Month, and we could not let the time go by without fully recognizing it. Suicide is a public health concern, as the number of suicide attempts and deaths in the United States is staggering. And today we find ourselves ever more challenged given the issues presented by COVID-19, isolation, altered routines, job losses, shuttered schools, and concerns for our own health and the health of our loved ones. But together, and with greater awareness, we can make positive change. Today's session is designed to increase awareness of behaviors and circumstances we should all look out for, share information about suicide and suicide prevention, and provide tools on how we can help people who may be struggling. We have with us today a tremendous guest speaker and expert who will share. His name is Mr. Kevin Briggs, and thank you to the power of technology. He's in California and we're here in Maryland presenting this webinar. Mr. Briggs is an international crisis management, suicide prevention, and leadership skills presenter. Sergeant Briggs' story and his lived experiences have been featured at the Technology, Entertainment, and Design 2014 conference as a TED Talk, NBC's Access Live, Yahoo News, The New Yorker magazine, Men's Health, People magazine, USA Today, and many, many more newspaper, radio spots, and podcasts across the world. His first book, Guardian of the Golden Gate, Protecting the Line Between Hope and Despair, was released in July 2015. Mr. Briggs is a retired California Highway Patrol Sergeant. He spent many years patrolling the Golden Gate Bridge, where he encountered endless numbers of people who were holding on to life by a thread, people who'd lost hope, people who could see no way out of their current situation, or people who were ready to jump to what they thought would be a sudden death and an end to their pain and hopelessness. By virtue of his compassion, gentle voice, eye contact, and his innate gift of listening to understand, Sergeant Briggs convinced over 200 people to continue living and to begin a new life chapter. These challenging but rewarding efforts earned him the nickname Guardian of the Golden Gate, and thus the title for his book. After service in the U.S. Army, the California Department of Corrections, and 23 years with the California Highway Patrol, Sergeant Briggs has dedicated his life in retirement to promoting mental health awareness across the globe through Pivotal Points, which is the company he founded. Today, Mr. Briggs trains others in suicide prevention, crisis management, and negotiations. In so doing, he shares his listening to understand skills, as well as his personal mental health struggles. He spends the majority of time speaking, teaching, and being an advocate at events, colleges, universities, first responder trainings, law enforcement events, and the like. He also works with the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention and the National Alliance on Mental Illness. So we really truly have an expert, and I'm very much looking forward to this conversation. But before I turn it over to Mr. Briggs, a couple of additional housekeeping notes. We've allocated an hour and a half to this webinar, and because this is designed as a community conversation, your voice is vitally important. So please feel free, as Paul said, to use the question and answer box to post any questions that you may have. And Mr. Briggs is happy to leave time at the end to try to address those as many as we can. This session is being recorded, and both the recording and the slides that he presents will be available to you later, and I'll share more on that. And let me finally acknowledge the content of today's presentation we know, and of course, deals with issues that many may find distressing, either because of your own experiences or that of a friend or a loved one or a colleague. While it's certainly not our intention to cause additional stress for anyone, we do know and do acknowledge that this content and this conversation are of vital importance to understanding mental well-being and safeguarding against these issues that we are discussing and confronting today. If at any time you feel overwhelmed or memories of your own past are triggered in a way that you find distressing, please feel free to take a break for whatever period you think is right for you and rejoin us if you choose. Or if you choose, write a note in the question and answer box that you would like to speak with a professional, and one of our social workers will reach out to you. Any note that you put in the Q&A box will be private. It won't be seen by anyone else attending this webinar today, but it will be seen by our health professionals at the University of Maryland Medical Center who are in the background and who are supporting this session today. All right, and with that, Sergeant Briggs, we turn it over to you.
Thank you, Donna. Absolute pleasure to be here with you all. Thank you for joining us today. This is a tough topic, a tough subject that I'm going to be speaking about, but it's so needed, and I appreciate you so much for taking the time today. What I'm going to be talking about is quality of life for yourself and for others, utilizing active listening skills to talk to someone who may be in crisis, and what can we do for them, and what can you do for yourself. I'd really like to think of you. How are you doing today? Very, very important. So let's go ahead and Paul will skip a couple of slides here. Next one, please, right there. Thank you. So I worked on the Golden Gate Bridge for a very long time. I didn't know this when I first started, and I grew up in Marin County. Marin County connects to San Francisco via the Golden Gate Bridge. I had crossed that bridge many, many times, but I had no idea that it was the #1 spot in the United States for loss of life to suicide. There was a lot of people there, unfortunately. I would handle, when I was working down on the bridge, 4 to 6 cases a month of this. And I did this for about 10 years. That works out to a lot of people who are struggling, having a very, very dark time in their lives. I can tell you most of the time when I'm not the only one who works down there, we're able to get to someone and speak with them, they would come back over the rail. But we did lose some folks too, and it just breaks our heart. It's a horrible thing to see and have to go through. But I'm a big advocate of training police officers now. I get to go to negotiator seminars and speak, and then listen to these fantastic folks talk about what they have done and accomplished, and how we can all get together, whether that's medical health professionals, officers on the beat, first responders, firemen, and all of us coming together. But it starts at home, and it starts with us now, and that's what I want to talk about and focus on more. So as you can see here in this photo, there's a young woman over the pedestrian rail. This rail is only about 4 foot tall. What I have learned to do, and what I recommend to folks who do something like this, other negotiators, is approach very easy. Let them see you so we don't scare them and startle them. But I would simply raise my hand and go, "Hi, I'm Kevin. Is it okay if I come up and talk with you for a while? So I'd like you folks to understand what we go through also and what we are trying to accomplish here. Of course, is safety. And when that person finally allows us to come up, and as you can see here on the other side of this rail is an officer. You see his foot sticking out. I want to get at eye level with these folks. It's very easy to stand and put your arms on this rail and lean over and talk to them. It's a lot more comfortable than kneeling on this hard, cold pavement, this cement. But I want to be at eye level, and I think that brings it to a very, very good note right from the start when they allow us to come up and chat with them. I want to empower them and to find out what's going on if they're willing to speak to us. And most of the time they are, and they talk, and we allow them to talk. And we're going to go over some active listening skills a little later. So this photo is unique because it's a teenager. And I will tell you, most of the time, when it comes to teenagers, we do not get the chance to even speak with them. They come up on that sidewalk, they look around, and they jump, and they're gone. Their frontal lobe isn't fully developed until around age 25 or so, and they think that anything what has been going on, they're looking just 5, 6, 7 years in the future. So whether they didn't make a sports team, they were bullied, they were abused, whatever it is, they think that their life's over and they don't see a future. So when we were able to speak with this young woman, this officer spoke to her for about 20 minutes or so. It wasn't very long. And she did come back over the rail. And then we take them to one of the local hospitals. So that's how that plays out regarding suicides on the Golden Gate Bridge and most other places. We don't just take them home or something like that. We take them to a hospital where they can be evaluated and get help, hopefully. 3 things that I saw while working up on that bridge 99% of the time when I was dealing with folks who were contemplating suicide. They suffered from a mental illness, whether diagnosed or not. If they were taking a medication for a mental illness, they stopped it a month or so prior, and they felt like they were a burden to their families. But I would ask them, have you spoke with your family about this? No, they haven't, but this is how they felt. So these are 3 huge indicators that we see each and every time. Next slide, please. So in 2019, I'd like to share some other information with you here. Go ahead. So in 2019, there were over 19,000 homicides in this country. Next, please. I was a traffic cop. We had over 37,000 traffic accident fatalities in this country. And next one. But look at this. Over 47,000 people lost their life to suicide. And in 2019, it was actually down 2.1%, first time in 20 years. But look at these numbers. What do we hear more about, and where's the funding going towards? Definitely towards the top 2. We have a lot of work to do as a society, but we're doing things like this. We're getting together and talking about this. We are making a difference, slowly but surely, but we do have a lot of work to do. Next, please. What are some of the myths we're talking about suicide? First one is it occurs without warning. I didn't know, I had no idea this was going to happen. Most of the time, there are things that have taken place. Usually someone will mention it, even jokingly, or they'll write something about it. They'll make a note, or they're writing to themselves in a journal about it. Maybe I saw something, you saw something, somebody else saw another thing, and we're not putting it together. Most of the time there are some sort of signs on this. Don't talk about it, you'll plant the idea. Now, I have 2 boys, and when they were younger in elementary school, I was asked by some parents to come in and do a talk about suicide prevention. I said, that's fine, happy to do it, but get with the principal, and let's square it away, and then we'll set up a date, and I'm happy to do that. Well, the principal said, no, we do not want him coming in here and talking about suicide, because if he does, it's going to raise our numbers. We're going to get suicides. We're going to plant that idea. Simply not so. That's false. One suicide will not lead to others. And that's absolutely false, especially when it comes to losing a child. So one suicide can definitely lead to others. And suicides increase during the holidays. Typically not. Now, depression does increase in the holidays, but generally what happens is it's dark, it's cold, most folks are hanging out inside. They think to themselves, those who are suffering, that if I just make it through this and we get to April or May when the sun's coming out, and if you're in an area where it snows, that snow is melting and people are starting to go outside more, if I can just make it through to that, I'll be okay. Well, here comes this time around and they're not feeling better and they still just can't seem to want to get outside and can't get past this. So in the springtime is when we tend to have more suicides. Next, please. What are some of the contributing factors to a mental illness? Environmental factors, things that we might have little or no control over. Where you're raised, what type of environment you're in, whether you were abused, or whether you went through a divorce, lost your job, these things that typically we have little control over. Substance abuse, long-term, has been linked to paranoia and depression. Traumatic brain injury, definitely including concussions. And we see this with a lot of sports folks later on in life. They get a lot of hits to the head, and as they get older, it's called chronic traumatic encephalopathy, CTE, and it's brain damage that forms later on in life and causes a lot of problems. Genetic plays a role, and also shame. Shame is a driving factor in both substance abuse and suicide. Next slide, please. I'd like to tell you a little bit about me. Not only did I work on the Golden Gate Bridge for a long time and do these interventions, but of course we all have a history. We all have things that have happened to us throughout our lives. So right out of high school, long time ago, 1981, I enrolled in the Army. And I was stationed at Fort Lewis, Washington for a year. And then in the second year, I went over to Germany. Well, in 1983, when I was just 20 years old, I was diagnosed with cancer at just 20 years old. And back then there were no computers. We didn't look this stuff up. I couldn't go out and access things and find out about this. But I was diagnosed with testicular cancer. And to me, it was extremely embarrassing. I was ashamed of it, even though I had nothing to do with it. But for me, I couldn't tell people about it. So I had my first operation in Germany, where I was, and then they sent me back to San Francisco to Letterman Army Medical Center, where I had 2 more operations. One of those being a lymphadenectomy, where they split your whole abdomen and they take out lymph nodes. And I don't know how many are in your abdomen, but they took out over 40, and over 30 of those were cancerous. So that cancer had spread up into my abdomen, which meant I had to undergo chemotherapy. So I did several months of that. And you lose a lot of weight, you lose all your hair. I became very depressed, and of course throwing up or feeling like throwing up every single day. Very, very tough stuff. And being at a very young age, I turned 21 when I came back from Germany. Being at this young age, they give you the maximum doses that they can of this chemotherapy. So it was brutal, but it did the job, of course. It killed the cancer cells. So I went down to about 135 pounds. After all of this, I started working out, trying to get healthier, eating better, gaining weight. Worked with my father in San Francisco for a bit. He had a printing business. And I want you to keep all these factors in mind when we talk about a mental illness. So in 1989, I'd actually gone and started working in corrections. I worked at San Quentin State Prison for a while, if you've heard of that. San Quentin. While I was working there, my mother was diagnosed with cancer, lung cancer from smoking. She started chemotherapy, but it did not go well for her, so she stopped it. And as she went downhill over the course of a year, she was at our family house that I now own. My sister took care of her, and that cancer spread throughout her body, went up into her head, into her brain, and people say and do things that they would never do when they were in their right mind if they didn't have an illness. But we watched her just steadily go downhill. And late one evening, she passed away. We see her very last breath. I closed her eyes. We talk about these environmental factors in the development of a mental illness. And that was quite brutal. So she was only 49 years old. Now, many, many, many years ago, I used to think, well, 49, she had a good life. She was older, but I am 58 now, and 49, we know that is nothing. So she died very early in her life, unfortunately. As we progress through this, I rode a motorcycle with the California Highway Patrol. One of the crashes I was involved in was on a rural road way out in the country here in Marin County, and one lane each direction, 45 miles an hour. This was a Sunday morning. I had about 4 or 5 cars in front of me, 4 or 5 behind me. We're all just tooling along, having a nice Sunday ride. And another motorcyclist came towards us around a corner way too fast, went over the double yellows, just missed the car ahead of me and nailed me head on. Our closing speed was determined to be 105 miles an hour. Now, I had no clue of what actually transpired. I was knocked out. I was in and out of consciousness for quite some time. I had the helicopter ride to the hospital and an operation on my elbow. I was off work for several months, but that head injury, plus others, have taken a toll. That really was. The thing with this, the only humor of it that people tell me about, because I was in and out so much, was I do remember telling the paramedics when they finally did get there and they brought me right across from where this was to a field when the helicopter was coming in, was we have to wear these big black boots. Perhaps you've seen them on motorcycle officers. Well, I remember telling the paramedics, because they're cutting all your clothes off, I said, do not cut the boots, because they're very, very expensive, right? So they got me good. They didn't cut the boots, but they cut everything else off. So here I am in this field in my underwear and these boots, and that's it. Pretty embarrassing. Now, if you happen to be thinking of this, get that out of your mind, because that will haunt you for a bit. So as we progress, I was off several months with this injury and trying to get back in order. I promoted to the rank of sergeant in 2008 and went back to the East Bay where I started. If you've heard of Oakland, California, just south of there is Hayward, town of Hayward. A lot of nice people, but there's a lot of gangs and a lot of violence there also. 3 months into me being there, I had these symptoms, and one was acid reflux, which wouldn't go away no matter what the pills were that I was taking. And I had this pain in my left arm and my left shoulder all the way down into my thumb, but it was only about a 1/4 inch. It was very, very small. It wasn't the whole shoulder. So it went from shoulder down to my thumb, but just a little piece of it. I thought I was overtraining because I was heavy into bodybuilding back then. But after 3 days of this, I got talked into going into the doctors and let's find out what's going on. So when I go there, I explain what's happening. Well, they kind of figured it out right away. They put me in a room. The doctor comes in and they do an EKG, and that comes out fine. Everything's good. But also they did blood work, and thank God they did. The blood work came back bad, poor. Your heart puts out an enzyme when it's not functioning properly, and my enzyme levels were very, very high. So I was 6 days in the hospital, 3 operations through the femoral arteries, and 3 stents put in my heart. Now, tell me that's not trauma. They say, and I've seen this with folks regarding trauma, sometimes they don't remember the pain that they were in, but they remember what was said to them. What I do remember about this, and I was awake for almost all of this, was the doctor coming in and telling me, Kevin, there's something wrong with your heart, and we need to figure it out. The operations were very, very easy, but that's the thing that I really remember that sticks out in my head was that doctor telling me that. I wish he could have told me in a different manner, put my mind more at ease. Because when he says that, I'm thinking, am I ever going to get out of here? Am I going to see my 2 boys again? So I had these heart surgeries. I was off work for several months, and then I go back and seem to be doing well. Unfortunately, many of us in law enforcement go through a divorce. And I did this, and when I was going through this, My wife, now ex-wife, was from Japan. We had 2 small boys. She wrote a note, a suicide note, to each of my boys and was looking up on the computer how to load a gun. So when I wanted to stop by the house, I never knew what I was coming up into. What's going to be there? What am I going to see? All of this took a heavy toll on me in the form of depression that I didn't see. I could go to work and function at 100%. I'm fine. I seemed fine. But when I went home, some days I was okay. Other days I would just sit on a couch for days at a time. I just didn't want to do anything. I didn't have the energy to get up and do anything, nor the desire to do anything. And that's what this was depression about. But I'm thinking, how could this be? How can I go to work and be fine? But when I came home and didn't have to do anything, there were many times where I didn't want to walk the dogs, see my boys, do anything. I didn't want to go upstairs and even pay bills. I just wanted to sit there. Very strange. It wasn't until I went to my doctor and told him, hey, something's going on, my regular doctor on a routine physical. And he has me take a test, and it's called the PHQ-9, Patient Health Questionnaire 9. Just 9 questions. How are you doing? How are you feeling? Your mood? And I filled this out as honest as I could. Well, he comes in the room with this form, says, Kevin, you have depression. How do you feel about that? I'm thinking in my head, what do you mean, how do I feel about this? All this stuff, and now depression. So he did put me on an antidepressant drug, which seemed to help for a while. But there were also some other things that I still have not been able to talk about, which happened decades ago. But there was some abuse by a non-family member when I was very, very small, and it went on for a long time. And what with me is I would see a man's face right here next to mine many, many nights when I would try to sleep, and it would just haunt me. So I emailed my doctor, and it took me a long time to do this, but I want to read what his response was. This is my regular physician. When I said, hey, I would like to see a psychiatrist or psychologist. And I didn't go into it, but I did kind of give him a clue on things. So he wrote me right back. Hi, Kevin. Thanks for your note. The decision about whether or not to work with a psychiatrist or psychologist in this situation is highly subjective, since it does not sound like you are in any imminent trouble. And I did tell him I am not suicidal, but I would like to get some help. And then he says, if this is something that you would like to explore, you're welcome to call our mental health services and set up an appointment. So that's a barrier, folks. That's a barrier, folks. If you need help, if you feel you need help, don't let this discourage you. I didn't. I went to a psychiatrist my first time ever, and she was a wonderful lady. And we talked about this. And she said, Kevin, you have post-traumatic stress disorder from those events decades ago. So what she thought would be best for me was to do EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. She sent me to a woman who does this, and I had to really reevaluate things about me. I was this type A conservative cop, but because of the high cholesterol, the heart things, all these other things, I really had to take a close look at myself, and I'd like you to do that today also. What is going on with me? Well, I started doing meditation, and that helped. You know, years ago, if you told me about medication or yoga, I'd go, no, not for me, not for me. I did try yoga. I only tried it once. I didn't give it a fair shot. But now I do meditation, which slows me down and helps with my sleep and concentration. But this EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, really helped. The lady that was doing the therapy with me, she said, Kevin, I cannot take that trauma away, but what we can do going through this is get it so that face is not right here, so it's way the hell out there, and you can get some rest. And that's what it did. And I want folks to know there are things that we can do, but you want to want to get better is the thing. It's difficult. I still suffer from depression. Sometimes I know that I just don't want to leave the house for a day or two, but I also know that it'll pass. And I have a great support unit that helps me with this. So These are the things that with me, and I will tell you, depression hit me so hard and it took a big toll on me. When if I would have acknowledged this sooner, I think I could have got help a lot sooner and been better, or at least, an improvement on things. Next slide, please. So why didn't I, and why don't many folks seek help? Being vulnerable, especially for males most of the time. We don't want to be vulnerable. We're here to fix things. I was in corrections. I was in the military. I worked at San Quentin Corrections. And then I was a motor sergeant in the Highway Patrol. All these macho jobs where you do not show a weakness. This isn't a weakness. This is life. This is like the cancer that I had. If we don't work on this, it may just get worse. Denial. This can't be happening to me. I'm bigger than this. I have all these macho jobs. Well, it can hit anybody. It really can. So avoidance, thinking that it'll go away in time, and the stigma about this is huge. That what people place on us for and things that I have heard, that the shame about it, not being good enough, thinking about that yourself, but what society places on us also, those who suffer, all these things that we don't want to confront, when really it wasn't that big a deal. Once I came out and spoke about this, I'm able to do this right now. I have friends all over the world. I didn't lose my job. So confront it, be upfront with folks, and you will find that life, it's a better quality of life because of it. Next slide, please.
Let me jump in right here, Kevin, and do two things. First of all, three things. First of all, thank you for sharing such personal information. And let me just let you know there's a comment in the Q&A box that says, how brave and resilient you are. Bravo for acknowledging and seeking the help you need. That's excellent. There have been quite a number of people that have come in since we began. And at the very top, I said that this conversation may be a trigger for some people and may conjure up some uncomfortable moments or thoughts. If you need to take a break, please do so and then rejoin us. If you would like to have one of our mental health professionals who is standing in the background talk with you, feel free to so indicate in the Q&A box. It is private. Our professionals will be able to see that and they'll reach out to you should you need that. And then I'll come back and say this at least one more time. And on this slide, you can see some of the resources that are available to you, and there may be resources as well later. And let me just tell folks as well, you can go ahead and type your questions in the Q&A and we'll try to get to them as we go along. Thank you.
Next slide, please. Thank you, Donna. So let's get into some active listening skills. But we're going to start with us. What kind of listener are you? So there's different listening modes. There's a bunch of them, but I want to talk about these three. Competitive, to where I make it about me. Here I am talking to someone and they're telling me about the giant bass that just caught, but of course mine is always bigger, right? Competitive, you're making it about you. You're responding in a way that always puts you on top. The passive listener, you care, you have empathy, but you're there like a lump on a log, so to speak. You're not providing any kind of feedback. You're just blah, you're just there. Active listening skills. And what I'm going to do is send out an active listening skills sheet that will be available to everybody, because of course we don't have the time to go into each and every one. But active listening skills, when you're there with folks, can provide a great advantage to yourself and to them, to allow them to speak and to really point out what is going on. Next slide, please. So here are some things that I have seen even negotiators not concentrate so much on, and I think these hold their weight. They're gold. So normalization, bringing up a topic by talking about it as other folks would who are going through the same thing. So if we take suicide, for instance, when I'm talking to someone and they're saying that their wife left them, they're losing their house, their dog died, they're on the verge of losing their job, all these different things. And they're just, continuing on is just going to be too much. Well, by normalizing what they're going through, you know what, Bob? anybody who has been going through all these different things might be thinking about killing themselves. Have you been thinking about suicide? You're normalizing what they're going through. And then in their head, really, they're thinking, wow, anybody might be going through this. It's okay. It would be a normal thought for all the things that have been happening. Validation, verifying what they have gone through. So going back to that, you know what? You've really been through a lot. That must be just so hard to have to go through. And they say, yes, you get it. You're validating them as a person and what they're going through. And gratitude, simply by saying, you know what? Wow, that must have been so hard for you to bring up and talk about. Thank you for doing that. So these three, I will send out an active listening skills sheet that goes into all of these when we get done here. So next slide, please. When I went through the FBI Crisis Negotiators course, this was one of the slides, and they allowed me to use this. And we look at HE equals LRT. High emotions equal low rational thought. Think about a time you slammed your hand in a car door or stubbed your toe. What did you think about and do in the first 10 seconds as compared to what did you do a half an hour later? High emotions equal low rational thought. Next, please. Because we know emotions drive behavior. Next, please. Remember, like I said, when you stub your toe, emotions drive behavior. So knowing that, we can try to control that better. Next. Here's some of the things that I have learned in negotiations. So when we talk about the objective, our objective is to influence behavioral change. We want them to say, you know what, I want to live. When I was working on the bridge, I didn't want to grab anyone and try to pull them over. I wanted them to make the choice to want to live, because it's very, very difficult to go over that rail in the first place. Imagine the courage it takes, or be on top of a building or hold a gun to your head. Imagine the courage that it takes to come back over that rail and face everything. That's what I want them to do. I think they'll have a much greater chance longevity-wise. Now, these folks are, most of the time, they're in a crisis state. Their coping mechanisms are out the door, or so we think. Whatever they have tried, we can always try to offer assistance, and we will talk about that in a bit. What can we control? Not a whole lot. That individual can get up and walk away or whatever they want to do. What we can control is what comes out of our mouth. How are we sitting? How are we standing? How are we positioning ourselves? I tell folks, lean in. So if I come up with crossed arms and like a big know-it-all and I'm on my phone and everything else, for these high-end conversations, these crisis communication, that's not good at all. It really isn't. It takes a lot of courage to have this kind of conversation with folks. Let's do it in a right fashion, in a right manner. What are our survival responses? When somebody gets very, very angry at you, if you don't leave me alone, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. What do we do? What is our comeback? So things that we need to think about prior to going into this, our survival responses, if they threaten me or threaten my family. It's not going to help the situation by jumping all over them. Next, please. So I tend to go by the 80-20 rule, 70-30. If an individual is speaking, let them speak 80% of the time, 70% of the time, and then me just a little bit, 20-30%. Because if I'm the one speaking, I'm not learning anything. When they're speaking, I'm gathering information. They're being allowed to vent. All this is fantastic. Now it's going to change as we progress in this. But from the start, if they're willing to talk, let them speak. Let them continue without interruption. What we call minimal encouragers. Wow. Is that right? Really? Little things to let them know that we are there, we are participating, we're there for them. Silence can be golden. Many, many times when I'm working with folks, I will take a break and tell them, we've been speaking for a while. I want to take a step back and let you think about everything we've been talking about. But I'm only going to do so if you promise me not to do anything until I come back up here when I'm working on the bridge. It's okay to have silence. Many times folks just want to have somebody there with them so they don't feel like they're stuffed in a corner all by themselves. I would rather you be silent. They say something like, everything's going to be fine. You always pull through. It's not good. That's not good. Think about things. Take time, slow down. And also, we talk about reversal. When I'm talking with folks, if they have, I spoke with a man one time, mid-30s. He ran a mutual fund that went downhill, and he lost a lot of money, lost a lot of people's money. I found out that he and his wife were very, very close. There was nothing going on there that was negative. So I reversed it. Sir, what would happen if it was your wife coming up here? I realize your financial situation, and it breaks my heart. But what would you tell your wife? So doing that, he really thought about it. And he said, oh my God, I would never want this to happen. So we talked about this for a while, and he did come back over, and his wife met us down at the bridge. And it was really, really cool. But some of the things that I use here to help folks. Next, please. When we're talking about hooks and hot buttons, hooks, go ahead. Hooks are things that folks might like to talk about and do. So commonalities create comfort most of the time. All those things that I've been involved in when I showed you that wheel, I don't talk about with people because it is not the Kevin Briggs show when we're talking to folks. It is about them. Very, very important. It is about them. Now, hot buttons are things that can make people angry. We can show that, please. Things that we probably want to avoid, and you learn as you go. But I always put government number one because there's a big diversity going on with folks. Government always, you never know what you're going to have. So they say, don't talk about politics and things. But hooks are positive things that folks want to talk about. We think, what can we hook into them that we can talk about? And hot buttons, we try to stay clear of. Next, please. Some of the sample questions that you might think about and utilize. So is it your life you want to end, or how it's going that you want to end? And this allows them to speak and could lead to other things. As long as they're speaking, they're venting, and we're getting information. Next. Can you tell me about a happier time in the past, and why don't you think you can go back to that? These are a couple of really good clues, and I'm going to share this PowerPoint with you all too, if you'd like to have it. Next, please. So here's what I want to put it out to you folks for a minute. What's some damaging phrases? What's something we would not want to tell folks? And I'll leave this up for just a minute here. And there's many of them. I will share some with you, but I'd like to see what you may say also. What are some damaging phrases we would not want to tell someone who may be in crisis? And Donna, if you could help me out here.
Okay, so we're looking for people to add your comments. It's not that bad.
Right.
It can't be that bad. Just go ahead and jump.
That's brutal.
Get over it. I understand. Get over it. A couple of those.
Great. Well, that's
Suicide is an option, but there are others. Man up.
You folks you're great. You're coming up with a lot. Usually I hardly get anybody. This is great. Can we hit the rest of the slide, please? So, thank you, folks. Here's just some of the ones that I try to stay clear of. And I need to remember these things, when you're on the fly and it's cold and it's dark out there on the bridge and the noise and everything else. You should calm down. I understand things will get better. I try to stay clear of these. So instead of, what you should have done, how about, have you tried this? Would be a much better way of saying that. Calm down. Has anybody in the history of telling someone to calm down ever calmed down? I don't think so. I understand. I understand exactly what you're going through. I've been there hundreds of times, and it'll pass. You're going to be fine. No, but we can use this as part of a summary of our active listening skills. So if I understand you correctly, this is what's been going on, and this is how you feel. That's fine. Things will get better. We don't know that. I'm not a mental health professional, but in these crisis communications, in these crisis times, you know what? At least you'll have the opportunity for things to get better. Next, please.
Kevin, before you go on, there's some others that let me just share because
Yes.
you really responded here. I know how you feel. You mentioned that suicide is selfish. Stop being depressed. Some people have it worse than you. It's just a phase. Life will go on.
Those are fantastic. Thank you, folks. Suck it up, buttercup. Yes, I've actually not used that as a crisis, but I've said that to people to show them what not to say. These are very, very good. You folks got it. Okay, so when we're talking about this one here, you have so much to live for. Really? Tell me what I have to live for. Now you just put yourself, you're backed up into a corner. Stay clear of that one. I've been through similar circumstances and I'm fine now. Oh, okay, so you're better than me. And believe me, I know how you feel, been there 100 times. Oh, that's not working. Stay clear of these. And also why? Why you here? Why did you do that? It tends to place blame, and the rapport that you're trying to build will diminish greatly. So we stay clear of these. Next, please. So folks, one more thing, and feel free to type this in. What destroys negotiations? Something that we all have, and I'm not going to get into politics here, but our past president, just to give you a clue, had a huge one of these. What do you think? Okay, you got it. Right from the start. Next part of this slide. Ego and arrogance. We cannot make this about us. When I'm up there, I will tell you, if I'm talking with someone, trying to develop rapport, and I'm not cutting it, it's not making it, I'm going to get somebody else. Now, sometimes, and on a personal level, we don't have the opportunity, but make it about them. That's what this is about, right? It's about them. So leave the ego and arrogance out of it. Next, please. Looking for someone who may be in crisis, who may be suicidal. Talk, behavior, and mood, okay? TBM, talk, behavior, and mood. Feeling like they're helpless and hopeless in their situation. Nobody's going to miss me. Nobody cares. And like I said before, feeling a burden to their families, okay? Or writing about it, saying goodbyes, and you're like, why is saying goodbye? What's that about? Next slide. So their behavior, and this is what I have seen many, many times with folks, is when I'm talking to them or interviewing them, isolation. They don't want to come out of the house. Sometimes they don't want to come out of their room. They're abusing drugs or alcohol, or they're sleeping a tremendous amount because they're in such emotional pain that this is how they deal with it. When they're abusing alcohol or drugs, or they're sleeping, then they're not feeling that pain that they were in. And like my ex-wife did, researching for ways to end their life. Next slide. And then how is their mood? Are they very irritable? We used to hang out and they'd laugh a lot, and they've just lost interest in things. Used to go fishing a couple of times a week, and now they just don't want to do anything. They don't want to come out and have coffee. So just have this emotional pain that is just so horrible that they can't get past it. Next slide, please. Remember that talk, behavior, and mood.
Right, and once again, a reminder that if this discussion becomes difficult or challenging for you, you can take a break and rejoin us, or you can put a note in the Q&A. It is private. Only the mental health professionals that we have in the background will see that, and they will reach out to you and offer you a chance to talk. So also, once again, some of the more prevalent resources are down at the bottom of this slide. Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you, Donna. Okay, next slide, please. So how do we have this conversation? Folks, we're losing 47,000 people a year to suicide. This is a courageous conversation. This is a tough one. But wouldn't you rather have this conversation than lose an individual where we could have made a difference? So I talk about Location, list, and listen as number one. Think of real estate when we say location, location, location. Well, this is location, list, and listen, okay? Where are we going to have this? By now, everything that I've told you is making it about them. Where are they comfortable? Okay, where is that individual comfortable? Your location. List what you've been seeing or what you've been hearing. They haven't gone out of their room or out of the house for some time. If this has gone on for over 2 weeks, what is going on? Talk, behavior, and mood. Listen. Remember we talked about 70-30, 80-20? Let them talk. And remember about our validations, normalization, and gratitude. You know what? I know it took a lot for you to tell me this. So thank you very, very much, and normalize what they're going through. Toxic positivity. You'll get through this. You're tough. You always make it. Everything's going to be fine. Stay clear of that stuff. When you're really, really suffering, that's not good. That's not going to help the situation. Keep it a secret, but don't tell anybody. I don't want my wife to know or my significant other. I don't want my boss to know. No, we're not going to keep this a secret because I want you around. Are they going to be angry at you? May you lose a friend or family member because of this? Yes. But you know what? Because they're still around and you made a difference in their life, your bond will be much greater. It may be a while. It may be a few weeks. It may be a few months. It may take a year or longer. But you know what? They will come back stronger and they're still here. Now, we've been putting up some slides for assistance. Feel free to have that with you. If you're going to have a conversation with someone, you can call the 1-800-273-TALK line, the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. Say, hey, I'm worried about this individual. What can I do? And they're going to help you with that. We know kids do not like to talk on the phone, but they text. The 741-741 crisis text line is there available to you. We have these slides up there with some great information for you. Now, what if they say yes? When you ask them, have you been having thoughts of killing yourself? Yes, I have. What do you do? Take a breath. Take a couple of breaths. We're not ready for that, right? That's a tough one. But to say, okay, gratitude. Thank you for sharing that with me. I know that had to be tough for you to come out and say. How long have you been thinking about this? Have you made a plan? Have you tried this before? And if you have, what stopped you? Now, whatever stopped them from completing suicide is a hook, right? Something that we can talk about. Well, I didn't want to do this to my kids. We can talk about the kids. Definitely talk about that. So, assistance, and if they say yes, and if you need help, we got 911, you can call somebody. Right then, get some help if you need that. Don't be afraid to do that. And then follow up with them. Hey, I just want to let you know I'm checking with you. Not for a couple of weeks. We see this a lot with folks that have lost a loved one, however they passed away. We go there, we bring them a meal, and after a couple of weeks, then they're kind of on their own. Checking with them. Just want to let you know I'm thinking about you. So this is the short, abbreviated version of how to have that conversation. Next slide, please. This is a crisis safety plan, and I have it here in front of me. It is a list, a written list of coping strategies and support for people who may be at high risk for suicide. And this is what it looks like. I'm going to have this available for folks too. It's just a one page or each side. You fill this out when you're feeling fine, when things are going well. Let's say that you lost a child a month from now on this date, and you know that is a horrible, absolute horrible day for you. And sometimes you think, you know what, I want to be with my kid. I don't even want to be here anymore. Well, you will fill this out where you feel safe. Who can you call? What can you do? Because when folks get into a crisis, I think they're looking like this, like a horse with blinders on, when we want them to look like this and see what is out there and what's available to them. So this has helped a lot of people. I am not the inventor of this. And I will say, if you want to use something like this, please do so, but do so with a mental health professional, because I am not one. But I want you to be aware of this for yourself and others, that there are things out there and coping mechanisms, and this is one of them. Next slide, please. So I also want to share this with you. Go ahead with the next part of this slide. This is called tip, and I get this opportunity to speak with a lot of doctors, mental health professionals, and the like now, and we share a lot of great information. Paul, can you put up the rest of this slide, please? So this is for someone who is actively in crisis. What can they do to get past this crisis? So tip, temperature. Have you ever jumped into a lake or a stream that is really, really cold? What happens there? All you think about is getting warm, and oh my God, it's so cold. So by dipping your hands, feet, throwing water on your face, very, very cold stuff, it can snap you out of that crisis. It can help to mitigate those feelings that you're going through right then. Intense exercise for your body, your type. Intense exercise releases endorphins, which can help mask the pain that you were in. And also paced breathing. And I would describe it as very slow, 4 seconds in, hold for 4 seconds, 4 seconds out, hold for 4 seconds in. So this very controlled breathing can help reset your mind and your body. So these 3 things you can use if you are in crisis to help get past that. They really do work. Next slide, please. So years ago, I wanted to do something for me because I have all these injuries and all these things going on. And so many of us, we may not technically be a first responder, but so many of us are. We're always putting out and helping folks. Well, I want to tell you that takes a heavy, heavy toll on us if we're not watching out for ourselves. My own son, who here I am flying all over, going to Australia and all these places, my own son was suicidal and engaging in non-suicidal self-injury. So here I am doing all this, but I'm missing out what's going on at home. Starts with us and our family, folks. Our own self-care. What are we doing for ourselves? Okay, especially when it comes to males and our support system, that's a tough one. We think we can handle everything on our own. We're the fixers. What are you doing for yourself? How are you feeling? So I make sure I take all the medications that I need to, and whatever else that may be. If you're doing meditation, if you're going out for coffee with people, whatever it may be. Professional care, a great stable of support. And I'm not just talking about psychologists and psychiatrists, but anybody in profession. So a yoga instructor, your teachers at school, whatever that may be, a life coach, and then your support system. Since I retired, I go to coffee with 3 or 4 individuals, 3, 4, 5 times a week, even sometimes. And we talk about all sorts of things, just life in general. That really helps me. It forces me to get out of the house and out into the public, because I'm very much this introvert. Even though I present, when I'm not, I'm usually in my room. So these 3 things help dramatically with your quality of life. But it starts with us on top. Do not be afraid to put yourself on top. We need to make this about us at times. Okay? You and your family. Next slide, please. Part of what I do for my stress are my dogs. And here is little Bella. It's the first small dog I've ever had. She is really, really cool. I had big dogs all my life. I wanted a Doberman, but I'm gone a lot. So, and I wanted something just out of the ordinary. But she looks like a Doberman, but she's only about this big. Now, next slide on that. I know folks like cats. Some folks like cats. If you like cats, that's fine. Cats can be cool. I had one, but it destroyed my curtains and my couches and everything else. Next on this, please. Bella did do some undercover work, and she's really, really cool. And I will tell you, we do have another one here, and she's snoring if you can hear her. But this little one here, Katie, she was a rescue. She was beaten and left abandoned and everything else. So she's doing wonderfully now, but it took a lot of time, a lot of effort just to get her to where she is now. Now she's so comfortable, she's snoring on my bed. So I have a short video that I want to show you how pets, whatever that may be, if you're into horses, that can really help with your stress and cortisol levels. If we can play that video.
And before I play, I just want to let everyone know to make sure you turn up the volume on your computer so you can hear the video. I'm going to go ahead and play that now.
Okay, next slide, please. Thank you. So that was Paul again, um, and that just shows the power that animals have on us. They really help with stress. I have one more story, one more event I'd like to share with you. We take a lot of photos down on the bridge. I get little kids and put them on my motorcycle. I've met people from all over the world. It was a really neat place to work, although it does have this dark problem. There is a barrier going up on the bridge now, so that will hopefully solve that. Next slide, please. That gentleman there is actually this man. This is Kevin Berthea. Met him on the darkest day of his life. He was actually on the sidewalk on a cell phone talking to a loved one when they called in and reported this. So I arrived on my motorcycle. As I was looking for him, I see, oh, that looks like him. And I stop about 50 feet away or so by the north tower of the Golden Gate Bridge. And as I'm getting off of my motorcycle, like I said, he's on the sidewalk. He looks my direction and he goes, and he leaps over the rail. But as he leapt, I yelled out something to him, and he reached out and caught the rail, swung in, slammed against it. I don't know how he did it, but he managed to catch himself, swing in, and land on this little bitty pipe. Now, around the two towers is just this little pipe, that pipe that you see there. After that is 220 feet down. That's it. There is nothing else. So I walked up, introduced myself, but he wanted nothing to do with me. He was very, very angry, and he kept yelling at me. If you come one step closer, I'm jumping. And that's all he kept saying, would not allow me to even step. I kept trying to step and get a little closer. And I would tell him, I'm not going to touch you. I'm not going to try to grab you. I just want to come up and speak with you for a while. So it took some time, 15 minutes or so, before he allowed me to come up and speak with him. And most of the time, I was below him. So even though he's looking down, at least I would be at head level. You can tell by looking at this photo, he simply doesn't care. His hand is in his pocket on his left hand. His right hand, because it's so cold out there, his right hand is up between his t-shirt and his skin. He's simply almost tripoding with his head in. He simply doesn't care, and he's looking down. But he was willing to talk. So I introduced myself just as Kevin. He said his name was Kevin, made it very easy. I'm going to personalize every single thing I can with him. Is call him by his first name if they allow me, and that's what he did. So he started talking. He was abandoned by his birth mother. She didn't want anything to do with him. And of course, that affected him greatly as he got older. His adopted family loved him very, very much, but his parents divorced when he was around age 13 or so. And he thought he was the cause of it. He had nothing to do with it. But because it wasn't explained to him why they were getting a divorce, he thought he broke up this family unit. So that set heavy in his head also. Um, every night when he would go to sleep, if he didn't do what he thought he would do, he would be bugged. That's when he would just really struggle. So what he did was run himself ragged every single day. He played 6 different sports, And as long as he stayed busy, he had practices during the week and games at night. As long as he stayed as busy as he could, he'd be fine, and he'd be so exhausted at night, he'd just fall out and try to pass out and go to sleep. And this is how his life was. Went all through school, did okay, as long as he was very busy. After school, he got a job, and he thought if he started a family, things would get better. So he started a family and had a baby. But his child was born a couple of months premature and had to stay in the hospital. Now, Kev thinks, what did I do to cause harm to this family, to this baby? It was just ate him alive. And then, after a couple of months, when the baby was able to come home, so did a bill for around $250,000. On top of all this, he had recently lost his job. So now he thinks he caused harm to this baby and he can't support his family. This was way too much. He'd had enough. Never been to the Golden Gate Bridge before. He's from Oakland. Had to find a way to get there, ask directions, and this is where we wind up. So he told me this in the course of over an hour, and we talked about a lot of different things. I had to think of what could I talk about, what could I bring up that would make this man want to come over the rail and live another day. What do you folks think? And just because we're lacking on time here, I'm going to tell you, but you may have got it also. His child, right? That's a hook, his child. Tell me more about her. What is she like? How tall is she? Well, I found out she had a birthday coming up. I said, well, Kev, don't you want to be there for her birthday? And he really thought about this. And this went over the course of an hour and a half now. Most of the time, he was talking. I spoke very little, but he wanted to vent. And I allowed him to just continue and giving him my full attention the entire time. I turned my radio off, and it was just he and I having this conversation, allowing him to speak. So at the end of all of this, I took a little break. And when I got his permission to come back up and speak with him, I said, Kev, what do you think about today, man? But being there for your daughter's birthday coming up. He looked at me. That's just around when this photo was taken, shortly before that. But he said, yeah, I want to come back over. I want to live another day because of my daughter. So I helped him up and over, congratulated him, and then I asked him, Kev, what did I do that helped this conversation going on? And what did I do that could have hurt this? Because I wanted to improve and be better at this craft to help other people. All he told me was, you listened. You let me speak and you listened. Now, why did it take this gentleman to come up to this stage 4 cancer of a bridge at times for somebody to listen? There was no magic. I can go to all sorts of negotiator schools, but if I didn't have the empathy to put myself in his shoes and realize what was going on, then this may have gone another way. That's what each and every one of us can do, is listen to folks. So, can we go to the next slide, please? He came back over. We take him to the hospital. And this, when we're talking about the hooks, remember that. What can we talk about to help folks out? The next slide. And then the very next one. So 2 weeks or so after this event, mind you, I don't follow up with anybody. I hope they do well, but I don't want to be a trigger. My sight, sound, smell, uniform, whatever that is, I never follow up with folks. But I did receive a letter from Kevin's mom, which I would like to read to you. Dear Mr. Briggs, nothing will erase the events of March 11th, but you are one of the reasons Kevin is still with us. I truly believe Kevin was crying out for help. He has been diagnosed with a mental illness for which he has been properly medicated. I adopted Kevin when he was only 6 months old, completely unaware of any hereditary traits. But thank God now we know. Kevin is straight, as he says. We truly thank God for you. Sincerely indebted to you, Narvella Berthea. And then she has a PS on the bottom. When I visited San Francisco General Hospital that evening, you were listed as the patient. Boy, did I have to straighten that one out. So, very nice letter. Next slide. So we both were asked to go out and to New York City from the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, where he presented me with an award, which I kept trying to turn down, or at least give it to the whole Marin area, because there's other officers that do this type of work. But they wanted one person, and so this is how it turned out. But Kev went up and spoke that evening in front of this large audience at the Lincoln Center in New York City. And that was our first meeting years and years and years later, and it was really cool. Next slide, please. Now you see, Kev talked about this picture, and he hated this picture, hated it, because it shows a black man in a very weak point in their life. And as he says, growing up in Oakland, you simply don't do that. But because of being out there, and next slide, coming up, when he did this talk, he received a standing ovation, and he realized he can come out and help others now. So he turned this dark, dark moment even better. And on occasion, a few weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, we did get a chance to speak together at a law enforcement event, and it was really, really cool. We cover a lot of different bases, and it's a lot of fun. He's a very neat individual. So I want to leave you folks with that we all can make a huge difference in someone's life simply by taking some time to be there for them. Remember the quality of life for yourself, though. So thank you very, very much for attending today. And Donna, we'll take it over from here.
Thank you, Kevin, so much. Once again, here are some of the resources for folks. Keep going, Paul. And I want to remind people, if you want to reach out and speak with someone, there are folks standing in the background who will talk to you. Several people have asked, and I'm going to say this now, and I'll say it again in just a few moments after we do the Q&A, in case you want to grab a pen. Several people have asked whether or not these slides will be available or if the presentation will be available, and they will. And I'll tell you now and tell you again, it's www.ums.org/not-all-wounds. And you'll be able to see this presentation in about 48 hours, as well as some others. Kevin, that was incredible. And the comments have been coming in at light speed about how incredible it is. And I wanted to mention one to you where someone says, I wanted to say before I forget, how much I appreciate him saying at the beginning, he would get eye contact with someone who was on the bridge. You can see the soul of the person through their eyes, of a person through their eyes, their intentions, their genuineness. And it's vital for the person to see that in you. So appreciate that. We're going to go to Q&A now. There are, again, quite a few as we flash past some of these additional resources. Keep going. All right, question and answer. There are some. Let's see. So one is, you mentioned earlier, Kevin, at the beginning, that it's hard to catch the teenagers because they can be a little bit more impulsive. And there was a question about impulsiveness and its relationship to suicide, but that their frontal lobes are not fully developed, and so they move quickly. Do you have some general advice for people who are trying to talk to teenagers, trying to help them through?
Sure. Many, and I didn't mention this, but I also work at my local schools up here in Novato in Marin County, 13 schools. 11 elementary and 2 high schools. So I've learned a lot by working with these kids as a mentor and things. I would say try to have that conversation with, and if you feel that it's just too tough, there are school psychologists and other folks that can have these conversations. If you're worried about your kid because of the talk, behavior, mood, what has happened in their life, talk to the teachers, talk with the principal, let them know what's going on and what you think might be happening. So your concerns, don't sit back and just let this go. So if you want to have that conversation, that's fantastic. You know, it is a tough one, but sometimes kids won't listen to their parents. I know I had a tough time with my oldest boy. Sometimes somebody else can, you know, a school psychologist or counselor, somebody that is in that realm where they may listen and build that relationship with. We can try as parents, but we know sometimes they're against us, so to speak, even though we have great intentions and we're there and we love them very, very much. But get with their school and tell them. And they might, hey, you know what? We have been seeing these different things. Let's get together and get a plan of action to help out this individual. So, like I said before, don't go through this alone.
There are so many questions. So there's another one here that says, and I'm sure this comes from a personal place, but the question is it possible, and I guess the question really is, do you find it so, that a depressed person is likely to make false accusations? Has that been part of your experience?
They can, especially when they want to make it more about me. Nobody likes me. They want to be, and that's why we see with folks. Let's take, for instance, school. If we lose a student to suicide, we want to deal with that tragic death as we do with the other deaths, whether someone dies of, let's say, cancer as a child or in a car wreck. We don't want to so-called honor that. Okay, we're going to name a street after them. We're going to get T-shirts with all their stuff. No, that's that's kind of how I feel about that, is remaining neutral on this.
There's one viewer who said, such a big issue. Any thoughts about what we need to do to get more funding and more focus in this area?
We got to talk to our governments. We need to band up as a whole and say this is where we want our funding to go, to write to our representatives and say this is what, when we have these days on the hill, so to speak, to either have our letters or to even be there in person and to talk about this. The squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? Eventually they'll have to understand, and a lot of times they do, but government is so tough. We pay a lot in taxes. Let's make that tax money work for us. We need to
Kevin,
be spending it here at home.
I think you're so right. And for many, many, many years, when people thought about health, they simply thought about somatic or physical health issues and not behavioral health. I do think more recently, there's been a greater recognition for what needs to be done in the arena of mental health and behavioral health generally. And you see slowly some attention being paid to that at various legislative venues. But you're right. We need to write our legislators and speak to this issue. In Maryland, which is where we are situated, there is right now a really great focus on mental health. But we need to make sure that everyone is paying attention and that there's awareness and that we look toward parity, that for as important as physical health issues are, mental health is equally important. I agree with you. There's a question here that I know has been addressed in the Q&A, but I want to pose it because it may apply to many people. And there are many listeners out there who say, I'm not an expert in this area, but people talk to me and people confide in me. So if we're untrained in anything related to suicide prevention, but have individuals who discuss suicide with us, is it our responsibility as bystanders to use the listening and support skill that you talked about to calm the person, or should we just go straight to calling in a professional?
Here's what I have seen, and this is my opinion. Many folks do not want to see a mental health professional. There's a stigma about it. They don't want it on their record or whatever it may be, but they do want to talk to someone. And if you're the ear that they want to come and chat with, I think we have an obligation. But also, if it gets too intense, it's time for that individual to get help past you. This is what I know. This is what I do. I recommend it. I said, you know what? There's only so much I can do, and I am not a mental health professional. I study this, and I like to learn about it. It's a very dismal topic, but like I said, if we don't talk about it, we're going to continue to lose a lot of people. So take it to where you're comfortable, and after that, you know what? I think you should see a mental health professional. I'm happy to go there with you if you have the time to do this. It is about them. There's only so much we can do. And on a dark note, if that individual does suicide at some time, they did it. It was them. It wasn't something that you did. They made that choice. And that's a tough one to talk about. But I'm going to tell you, there's a lot of guilt and all these feelings that come about and blame and everything else. But that individual made that choice. But try to help them the best that we can. And I highly encourage them to seek a mental health professional. And nobody's going to look at them different.
Sure. Thank you for that. I would also offer for many people who know that people will confide in them and who want to help, there is training available called mental health first aid, and many of our hospitals in the medical system will offer that to the community. So you may want to take that class. It's not particularly long, and get some background that would be helpful in how to answer and increase your comfort level if you know that you're going to be confronted or approached in that way. And then also just have ready with you many of the resources that we have posted during this and that we will have posted up again when we share all of these slides, so that you know whom to reach out to if you need to reach out to someone for more assistance.
Donna, that is great. If I can interrupt, that mental health first aid, I did go through that. I think I went through them all. There's Assist, Safe Talk. There's a number of these classes that can help you have this conversation. They'll dig into it a little deeper. They have a longer time frame than I did, of course. So if you're interested in this, that's great. That's fantastic. There are a number of classes out there that you can do.
I'm reading some as they're coming in now still. Okay. All right, this is just a comment for you, and it's from this listener, and I'm so sorry for this. My son jumped off the Ben Franklin Bridge. When I speak to groups regarding suicide, I've hesitated to reveal his method for fear of copycats. So please let Mr. Briggs know that his insight on this was really helpful, and it's going to help me moving forward. You said, talking about it doesn't make it happen somewhere else.
Well, I'm
Go ahead.
extremely sorry to hear that. And I'll be honest with you, I have received, and Kevin has received, Berthea, some negative talk once in a while when we do show that picture of him over the rail. But I think it's to show folks where they can be when they're at their darkest level, and how we can get them back over. Each and every one of us can get to somebody before they get to that level. This is a very brutal stuff, but if we don't face this head on, then we're going to continue to lose folks. At some point, I know as a society, we're becoming gentler and gentler and gentler, but this is not a gentle subject. This is a very brutal subject. And you can talk to anybody who's been through it, or any survivors and the families. So it is very tough, and I'm very sorry for your loss.
I want you to let me know. I want to let you know, Kevin, that the comments keep coming in. Amazing, beautiful. Thank you for sharing. Thank you so much. Bless you. Very, very powerful. You're a blessing. Thank you. And I'm scrolling through other questions. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences. Truly an excellent presentation. I learned a lot today. Thank you for being you. You're an inspiration. It's been a revelation, an amazing presentation, and on and on and on. And again, when can you post the slides? We'll come back to that. I'll give you that again. Do you think gender-matched negotiations are used more so, or might there be issues of transference concerns?
No, I think that's a very good idea. And it goes right along with to get just a tad away from that, of having mental health professionals ride with police officers now. I also think that's a very good idea. I want to match that individual who we're talking to the best that we can. Now, with a lot of small departments, sometimes we can't do that. But whether it's a veteran, whether it's African American, whatever that may be, if for some reason I'm not making it and I'm trying my best, I want to be able to get somebody else. And that's true also of right down here, seeking out a mental health professional. I will tell you, if you're not clicking, most good mental health professionals will tell you, if it's not clicking right, go ahead. There goes my dog. Go ahead and find somebody else. It is about that individual. That's what this is about. So I'm going to look this dog. Excuse me 1 minute.
Oh, that's okay. All right. So once again, ums.org/notallwounds, and I'll give you that one more time as well. Let's see. How do you deal? Here's a question. This is a good one. How do you deal with family or friends that just don't get it? So those people that could be support networks, perhaps, that are not getting this.
See if they can talk to somebody else, possibly, who can, or share with them the numbers of what is going on, to see, you know what, this is what happens. How would you feel if? Maybe a good way of approaching it. And what do you think about mental illness? It's all in your head. Well, of course it's in my head. Where do you think it is? In my thumb? Get over it, get past it. Well, it's not like that. 1 in 4 of us is going to suffer a mental health issue every single year. This is real. This is tough stuff. We can share as much information as we can, but they need to really figure this out and say, you know what, this is true. My life, or if we're talking about somebody else and you're going third person, their life is so important. Wouldn't you want the best for them? And as someone, and you can always use Kevin Briggs as an example, he had cancer, he had head injuries, he has the mental health issue. And man, he'll tell you that mental health issue was brutal, and he's still working on it.
You gave us some statistics right at the beginning. And here's a question that says, have you found, I know we know the answer to this, have you found a higher number of men versus women considering suicide in your experience?
Yes. Now, when it comes to that, we do lose more men to suicide. White males are the top for this. And it's just always been that way, unfortunately.
Yeah. And a note here for you says, I'm a crisis counselor with Crisis Text Line. You covered many things we're trained for, but also many additional items. And I'm so grateful to you for sharing that with us, which is great. It's a very high compliment.
That is Crisis Text Line. I'm actually on the board for the police officers for Crisis Text Line. And that's a wonderful, if on the bridge, it even says there's a deal there, little signs that say Crisis Text Line. So I would say we hear this a lot. Thank you for your service. But that is a particularly tough one, talking to someone who, is going through so much in their head, and they text, and to try to get them help and to get them down at a warm level, as we say. So very tough job. Thank you.
I must say that so often our listeners have so much to offer, and here's one such thing. It says the Department of Veterans Affairs also has a gatekeeper training, and it goes by the acronym S.A.V.E. that can be provided to veterans and others who are at increased risk for suicide. And you can contact your local VA to find out about that and the schedule for that. So that's another source.
Fantastic.
Here's
Thank
one.
you for sharing that.
Here's one, and this will probably be our last one. I'll try to combine 2 questions together here, which is any suggestions on how best families can heal from losing a child to suicide? And then also, similar question, what are the resources for families?
Sure. So I've dealt with families who have lost kids and quite a few times, unfortunately. If you haven't seen this, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, late 60s, developed this. It's what people will go through when they're going through bereavement. It was developed actually for people who were suffering from cancer or an ailment and going to die, but it actually comes around, and it's depression, anger, bargaining, and then leading up to acceptance and meaning. So look up Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and you'll see what she talks about as far as processing losing an individual and knowing that a normal death, and the only normal death I know is old age, may take 2 years before you tend to, okay, that individual, it's gone. It's okay for me to continue on. Not that we forget about them, but it's okay for me to live my life. Can you imagine losing a young person to suicide, a son or daughter? I mean, the rest of your life is that. So it's going to take a long, long time. But we also find meaning in that, the good times that you had, and how would they want you to live? And I will tell you from my own personal experience, every single person that I have spoken with who has been suicidal did not want to hurt anybody else. They were just in such emotional pain that they couldn't take it anymore. So I hope that helps.
Kevin, I would say that you have helped a lot of people. We can tell that by these comments. You've helped a lot in your lifetime. You helped a lot here today and provided us just a wealth of information. You've been a font of great information, and we are so very grateful. Now, to everyone watching, We are collecting all of the questions in case we missed any in the fray here. We'll try to get back to you. Let's have the next slide, Paul. And so for everyone listening and the many times that the question has been asked, a recording of this webinar will be available in about 48 hours, give or take a little bit, you'll see the website there, and I'll read it in case anybody is just on the phone, www.umms.org/not-all-wounds. And there you can also see prior webinars that we have done, including several about trauma, racism, and its relationship to mental health, helping your children cope with mental health issues, as well as depression, anxiety, adverse childhood experiences, how to deal with mental health issues for seniors, and more. So we invite you to go there. If we've missed some questions, we'll try to pop up answers for those as well. And with that, once again, Kevin, major thanks. Thanks for who you are. Thanks for your spirit. Thanks for your eye contact, all the things that you've done, and for all the ways that you've helped each of us today, as well as I want to thank my team that's been in the background of responding to many of the questions that have come up. So very appreciated, and I want to wish everyone a great day. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for joining today's session. You may now disconnect and have a great day.